Welcome to Timeless Chronicles, the actual story behind the sword in the stone. It's supposedly the sword of King Arthur Pendragon, the Celtic Briton who fought against Saxon invaders in post-Roman Britain. If Arthur existed, he was probably a 5th century warrior who led the Britons against Anglo-Saxon invaders. A decentralized continent, Britain experienced multiple attacks from external forces, so it makes sense that the natives would build a legend around a leader who could unite the people. The sword is sometimes called Excalibur, and only the rightful king of Britain can free it from its confines. As is often the case with legends, many variations exist to how Arthur obtains his sword. The most popular is that as a young boy, Arthur pulled the sword from a stone. Another version proposes that the Lady of the Lake, sometimes called Nimue or Vivian, gave Arthur the sword. After Arthur falls in battle, one of his knights returns the sword to the lake, where a hand catches it and disappears. The 12th century poet Robert de Boron placed the sword in an anvil instead. The first non-Welsh reference was in a 12th century chronicle, but Sword in the Stone is from a French poem. The first historical, as in non-contemporary, reference to King Arthur was written by Geoffrey of Monmouth during the 1100s. He lived and worked as both a cleric and historian in Oxford, with major texts including the prophecies of Merlin and history of the kings of Britain. The latter begins with Brutus, a descendant of another legendary character, Aeneas, claiming Britain, and ends with the reign of Arthur Pendragon. Details from Geoffrey's account, like Guinevere and Merlin, became standard for years to come. Sir Thomas Malory's La Morte d'Arthur immortalized the legend during the late 1400s. Sir Thomas Malory wrote La Morte d'Arthur somewhere between 1469 and 1470, but it wasn't published until 1486. Malory's work became widely read and regarded because it came about at the same time as the printing press. The rise in literacy, coupled with Malory writing his story in English instead of Latin, led to a second and third printing. Malory might have written the tale while in prison. He chose the wrong side in the War of the Roses and found himself locked up for a time, twice. This gave him plenty of time to write his epic poem. He passed before his work was published, but his legacy remains, with his work becoming familiar to future writers, including William Shakespeare. In Malory's story, Excalibur and the Sword in the Stone are two different weapons. One change Sir Thomas Malory made to the legend, which caused some confusion, was to differentiate between the Sword in the Stone and Excalibur. The original sword is pulled from a stone, but then it breaks during battle. Arthur must earn the true Excalibur from the Lady in the Lake, aka Nimue or Vivian. After Arthur's final battle with his nephew Mordred, Arthur has one of his knights return Excalibur to the lake. A hand catches the sword and disappears beneath the water. Through the Middle Ages, the Sword in the Stone became wrapped up in romantic stories involving Arthur and his knights. As time moved on, and Arthurian legends made their way across continents, the tone of the stories changed. Arthur could no longer be just a warrior who united his people. He also had to fall in love in the romantic and courtly way. To do that, he needed a court. Different accounts report different numbers of Arthur's companions, from 13 to 1,600. The knights who star in their own adventures are usually Sirs Lancelot, Kay, Bedivere, Gawain, Galahad, and Mordred. Lancelot famously saved Arthur's life through his purity and ruined Arthur's life by falling in love with Queen Guinevere. Kay is sometimes portrayed as Arthur's stepbrother, but has always been his oldest companion. Bedivere is usually right alongside Kay, and is also the knight Arthur gives Excalibur to, for return to the lake. Gawain battles a pesky knight in green armor, and Galahad finds the Holy Grail. Mordred is sometimes written as Arthur's illegitimate son, but is always written as the one who defeats Arthur and tears down the idyllic Camelot. Sir Gawain and Sir Lancelot both wield the sword in some traditions. Before Sir Thomas Malory wrote La Morte d'Arthur, two compilations of Arthurian legends circulated in the medieval world. the Vulgate cycle, aka Lancelot Grail, and the post-Vulgate cycle. In the Vulgate collection, much emphasis is placed on Lancelot and his affair with Queen Guinevere. It also relied heavily on the influence of Robert de Boron and Chrétien de Troyes. A French poet, de Troyes wrote the Conte du Graal as a retelling of the search for the Holy Grail. He never finished the work, but it still heavily influenced Arthurian legends to come. One change de Troyes made was to the ownership of Excalibur. He claimed the sword belonged to Sir Gawain, one of Arthur's knights. Alfred, Lord Tennyson's poems, and T.H. White's The Sword in the Stone set the foundation for modern interpretations. Tales of King Arthur never disappeared, but they enjoyed a renewed popularity in the 19th and 20th centuries thanks to two key British figures, poet Alfred, Lord Tennyson, and writer T.H. White. Both borrowed heavily from Sir Thomas Malory in their own way. 12th century knight Galgano Guidotti thrust a sword into a stone atop Montesiepi and may have inspired Arthurian legends. According to lore, Italian knight and nobleman Galgano Guidotti decided to give up his comfortable life for a hermitage after receiving a vision from the Archangel Michael. On the trip to tell his fiancée about this life-altering plan, he reportedly received another vision from Jesus, Mary, and the apostles to climb a hill, which happened to be Montesiepi. At the top, he heard a voice telling him to renounce his wanton ways. Guidotti responded that it would be easier to split a rock with a sword. Guidotti's sword was believed to be fake until science confirmed its medieval origins. Most people, except for the most faithful, believed the sword at Montesiepi was fake. Because only the hilt and a few inches of the blade are visible, it's tough to visually date the sword. Carbon dating has proven the metal at least is from the 12th century. Ground-penetrating radar also revealed a cavity underneath the sword, perhaps providing a burial place for Galgano Guidotti, or Saint Galgano as he became known. A pair of skeletal arms at the site also dates to the 12th century, which reflects a legend that says anyone who tries to remove the sword will have their arms pulled out. Pilgrims and non-believers alike still travel to the site in Tuscany to this day. Disney and other popular culture sources continue to blend Excalibur, the Sword in the Stone, and even the Holy Grail into one. The legend of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table continues to ignite imaginations today. Maybe people see a bit of themselves in Wart, the young page in the Disney story who rises from nothing to become something. Perhaps they see themselves more like Madame Mim, just causing chaos in the world. Or maybe an aspiring bladesmith is out there right now chasing their own Holy Grail. Like all good stories, part of the reason the tale of Arthur pulling the sword from the stone endures is because there are universal truths in it. In general, people want to do something special with their lives. They want to make the world a better place, and they want to believe in just a little bit of magic.